everybody. Welcome to UK CORRAL, the podcast that reviews every good UK comic ever made. I'm your co-host, Mike L., and I'm joined by Adamantium.
Shadoo!
Changes every week. All right. Thank you for joining us, Adamantium, and Nice Man.
Yes, destined never to actually be nice.
All right, yeah. Well, you've got some negative comments out of the way before we started, I think. So maybe the rest of it will be positive. We'll see, right? No? Okay. And then also tonight we have a very special guest joining us for the first time. Am I pronouncing this right? Is it Ishmael?
Oh, it's Ismail.
Ismail. See, I knew it.
Yes,
I knew I was wrong. Ismail. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for joining us. So,
Yeah, thank you for having me.
absolutely. So why don't you give us a quick rundown? Because for those that are just joining us, Adam and I are in Windsor, Ontario, Canada, your mortal enemy. And Paul is calling in from... Where are you calling in from again, Paul?
Dayton, Ohio.
Dayton, Ohio. And Ismail, where are you calling in from?
Dayton as well.
Oh, look at that. What a coincidence.
Oh, all
okay,
right.
okay.
Yeah.
So you're...
The Ohio connection, all right.
There
Yeah.
you go. So you're
Right.
you're a comics fan then?
Yes, lifelong lover of comics. Originally from Seattle, grew up, in between Washington State and the Middle East, and I've kind of spent my entire career as a writer. So I've worked as a journalist, editor, etc. But yeah, I've always loved comics, and especially characters like Dredd, which we're going to be talking about today. So Dredd, stuff like Warhammer 40K, I'm a fan of stuff like that. So when I was at an event and I was speaking about comics, and Nice Man overheard me, and we started a bit of a discussion about classic UK comics, and that's just kind of what got my appearance here rolling.
Nice. Excellent. Well, thank you for joining us. And if I could, you don't mind me asking, how old are you?
I'm 31.
31. Okay. So Adam and I'm definitely a bit older. Paul's a bit older. Adam, how old are you again?
Oh, 67.
67. Okay, you got me beat. All right. No, but I got into UK. I'm not going to repeat everything I said before, but I got into UK comics through basically Alan Moore, like doing Miracle Man. That was pretty much it. And then also the Man of Iron Transformer story, but we're not going to talk. We don't want to put Paul through anymore. Talk about the Man of Iron. We're going to jump right to Judge Dredd here. So for those that don't know, this series, this is a American comic by Eagle Comics. It's a reprint of the Judge Dredd stories in 2000 AD. I actually had this issue. And instead of starting at the beginning, they jumped ahead to 2000 AD number 149. Does anyone know why they would do that? Because I don't.
Well, I think very likely they understood they had to introduce this to a new audience, and they wanted what was going to be punchy, what was going to have the characterization of Dredd already, and then you're also going to introduce some iconic characters. So we have two already in the opening story, so I won't mention that too much right now because we're going to get into it. And I think the subsequent two stories in this issue, this collection, they really just kind of give you the idea, the tone of who Judge Dredd is, what the stories are going to be, and I think it's probably selectively the most palatable for an American audience.
Okay.
That's my view.
Sure.
We've definitely gone through like the early prog, so we've kind of seen the growing pains of Judge Dredd until I think the last arc we got to with Robot Wars really cementing who Dredd's character really is, and we got a good handle on him. Now I think we're jumping ahead a little bit to kind of show, okay, let's get past the paces of where we've been. Let's see who he is now in his full characterization. And Mike, I have to say you picked a good one because you picked the debut of, I don't want to say my favorite Dredd adversary, but definitely probably the most iconic.
Well, and it wasn't even, I can't take credit. It was Eagle Comics that took credit, that can take credit, because they're the ones that started the series with 149, right? Now,
Well, I wasn't accusing you of publishing it, but yes, that's true.
Okay. So here's another question. Was this Brian Bolland's first arc? Do you know?
No.
No?
No.
Oh, interesting.
I
okay.
yeah.
Sorry, go ahead, Ismail.
No, I was gonna say he was definitely on some earlier progs.
Okay, because
I'm not sure what his first one would have been, but he was definitely like a major presence. Much earlier than that.
See, because the art so far, the art has been, I'll just say, uneven. And in one story arc, they'll rotate between 3 or 4 artists. So I thought maybe that this was kind of like a time when they settled into a regular creative team, but maybe I'm wrong. But you know what? We don't do research on this podcast, so we're just going to jump right into the story, okay? So I'll just say quickly, Brian Bolland is one of my favorite artists. He doesn't do much interior art. In fact, since The Killing Joke, I don't know if he's done any interior art. Can't even think of something that he's done. Like he did back in the 80s, he did Camelot 3000. Then he did Killing Joke, and I can't think of anything else. Mostly it's just been covers, right? No one. What's that, Paul?
Seems to be.
Oh,
I mean,
okay.
we'd have to research it, but nothing is springing to anybody's mind.
Right. Thank you, Paul, for pointing that out. Yeah, no one's jumping in. Okay, anyway. Okay, so let's jump right into this. Okay, I'll do the first one, okay? And then Adam, you can do the second one.
Okay.
So this is by John Wagner, art by Brian Bolland. Oh, what a great splash page. Oh, sorry, I didn't even mention the cover. I love this cover. It's funny because when we were doing the 2000 AD stories, some of them had Dredd on the cover, some didn't, but the covers were pretty lackluster, right? Even the collection, it's volume 1 of the complete Judge Dredd, to me has a very lackluster cover. This cover makes you want to buy the comic, right? I think it's excellent. Incredible splash page. Were you going to say something, Adam?
I have to say, you can definitely tell it's for an American audience because you have kind of the power pose for Dredd on the cover. He's like over file tooth there. I think this is going to be the real cue for, as a reader, trying to assess if this is going to appeal to that American crowd because, Judge Dredd in a lot of ways has been a parody of hyper-masculine Americanism, and that's been a big thing for his run since the initial Judge Dredd strips. So it'll be interesting to see how these might fare, maybe given our thoughts of how this goes for an American audience, given the kind of parody nature of Dredd himself as a character. But I really like the cover, even though I don't care for the orange background. It's very G.I. Joe in that way, but the rest of it's okay.
On my monitor, it looks red. I don't know.
That's orange, red, whatever.
Okay. I really like it though. But anyway, okay, let's jump into the story here. We got a great splash page of Judge Dredd. Nothing going on there, but it's a cool opening splash page. That's important, right? We're introduced to a character. I've read this before, but you guys are more familiar with the stuff than me, but I didn't know anything about him. But this is the introduction of Judge Death, right? This is a great opening scene, and the bottom page here to me seems like something Alan Moore would do. This 4-panel sequence where Judge Death just passes his hand through the guy's chest and kills him. Oh, love stuff like that. Which sometimes I mean, Alan Moore is the best writer, but sometimes I give him even more credit than he deserves because I kind of just assume he invented everything, which he didn't. But anyway, so we get the introduction of Judge Death, who's kind of a mixture of a judge and also like a zombie, to the best that I can tell. The real judges are quickly called in to investigate this crime, and when they come across this body, they find that this guy has got this look of terror on his face. They're trying to figure out what's going on. They do like a little what's it called? What's it called? The police procedurals. What are those called?
Like a forensic analysis.
There you go.
Yeah.
A little forensic analysis, and they find out that his body is in an advanced state of decomposition. They're trying to figure out why. Let's see here. So then they send the 3 judges out to go investigate what's going on. Oh, they also find out that the connection here. What was it? What is it? I can't remember why they go to where they go.
Well, I think, Mike, one thing you forgot to talk about, not only is an extreme decomposition in like the tissue found underneath the victim's fingernails, but it's just not like extreme as in days or months. They're saying centuries old.
Yes, right.
So that's a first clue that there's something hyper unusual about this. Mm-hmm. And actually, I think you just missed one point where while the judges are investigating this, well, 2 points, I guess. Technically. I can mathematics. It's fine. But then they call to the next scene because of Judge Death going to the club because he wants to get it on. He wants to go to Bug Eyes, and he wants to hear those sweet, hot summer jams. So I'll let you go on with that.
So then we cut over to the club, and Judge Death goes into this club, and we get a nice shot of this DJ here.
And I just wanted to add, this is one of my favorite scenes in this in this prog. Oh my god, it is so good. And I'm gonna explain why in a second.
Sure. Well, you could even. Well, yeah, it's a pretty short story. We'll jump back to it. But so basically, Judge Death goes up to this DJ, and he judges him, and he kills this guy. And then there's a Judge Dredd is called in. Control the Dredd. Sounds of distress coming from the rabbit hutch. So then Judge Dredd goes in to investigate with some other judges, and they see the stench of decay. We see dead bodies all over the dance floor. Well, it's pretty gruesome, but it's well drawn for sure. Then they see Judge Death, and they recognize right away that he's dressed like a judge or a mockery of one. And then Judge Ross, I guess it is, goes up to attack him. And again, we get this nice little sequence, this 3-panel sequence of the action of the hand coming up. Now, this is one of at least 2 moments that I thought the writing stood out as being bad, because the hand goes up and goes through his body, but then there's a bubble of dialogue going off camera. His hand sliced right through Ross's neck. Like, we can see that. And if there was a problem, it could have been drawn a little bit clearer, but it's pretty obvious based on what happened earlier that that's what's going on. So that kind of bugged me, but we'll get to that later. So then anyway, they open fire on Judge Death, and we see the bullets go through him, but he's unfazed by it. And he says, "You cannot kill what does not live." So they're kind of freaking out, like, what the heck is going on? Then he once again goes up to a different judge, Judge Runciman, and he puts and we know his fingers go through his neck because, again, dialogue off camera, his fingers piercing Runciman's neck like it was custard. That's okay, we'll forgive that. Then Judge Dredd takes a shot, and he's like, "Bullets don't stop," and switch to incendiary. How do you pronounce that? Anyone who can speak English better than me.
Incendiary? No, you got that.
Incendiary, okay. So then this ignites the guy in fire, and Judge Death. But then the body falls over, and it's almost like a ghost comes up from the body and says, "Lawbreakers, you have delayed me. That is all. This city is evil, but I will cleanse it. All will be judged." So then he takes off, and they're trying to figure out what's going on. Like, okay, well, we got to regroup and figure this sucker out here. Yeah, it doesn't look like he's taking any prisoners. So then we cut back. Now again, I'm not as familiar with these characters as you guys are, but this is Judge Anderson. Is this the girl that was in the second movie?
Yep.
Okay. So she's a regular.
Now this characterization of her in the film, they altered it a little bit compared to what it was like in the comics forward, but like the original iteration, true. They kind of had an Anderson stand-in in the Stallone film as well, but not nearly as developed. Like, I don't believe that character had psionic abilities at all.
Okay.
And, I was going to comment about the artwork. I'm going to save that till we do our thoughts at the end. Sorry, go ahead.
No problem. So then, and again, I kind of forgot about this, but she is psychic, right?
Mm-hmm.
I didn't realize that. Oh, she's a side judge. I've only read a few Judge Dredds. This is why, Ismail. So anyway, so she comes in and she puts her hand on like the corpse, the skeleton, and now Judge Death comes through her, and we know that because Judge Dredd says, "It's his voice. Who are you? What do you want here?" And this is Judge Death, and he's basically like, "I've crossed the dimension span to bring justice to your world." And what he explains is that long ago in my world, long ago, judges in my world saw that all crime was committed by the living. Therefore, life itself was illegal. Kind of an extreme motivation, but okay, we'll forgive it, right? We judged our people.
Like the Sentinels on crack.
Right. we judged our people, all of them. We wiped the curse of life from our world. Now the time has come to judge yours. The sentence is death. It will be carried out. Oh, crap. So now they're worried. Okay, so then she takes off. We cut back to her apartment. Oh, I love this scene. This is so cool. She's kind of like winding down at night, and then she looks out her window, and she sees this ghostly like apparition in the window, and it's Judge Death. And then it possesses her, and basically, and he's like, I needed a receptive mind, Anderson, your mind. Now you can be my arms and legs. And so then Judge Death possesses her to go to the morgue and to steal his dead, like a skeleton, his body. So then she, the guys that work there are trying to stop her. She kicks one of the guys right through the wall. Another great shot, right?
Right out the window.
Right. It's so good. It's so good. She gets into her vehicle and drives away. Oh no, but she's fighting. That's what happens. She's fighting. So she drives the ambulance into a pole. And then Judge Death is like, this is foolish, Anderson. Now you must walk. It is not far. So she kind of crawls out and he's walking with her body. Then we cut over to the Hall of Justice where the other side division telepaths are listening for messages from Anderson. And basically they know what's going on. Judge Death's trying to stop her transmitting, but Anderson will quit. She's headed east on Charles Atlas Bridge. So then now Judge Dredd is going to go take care of business. So then he goes in with some other judges. They go to where is it again? To Charles Atlas Bridge. Or no, sorry. They go to, where is this?
Okay, so one thing you forgot. Anderson was able to emit one word, one psychic utterance to everyone there. And I've never heard this said in the adaptations.
Right.
I never have thought of it as boing, but I've had other people pronounce it like that. I thought it was Boeing, but it's a type of like miracle solution drug substance thing. Basically, it's kind of like a plot convenience entity tool in these comics. But yeah, anyway.
So this is the recurring thing that they've used this before?
I know they would use it in the future. There'd be a few more. Ismail, you know better than I think I probably do.
Yeah, I think they're. I think it's used in an earlier prog. I think prog 136. There's a note.
Holy shit!
think,
you know the numbers. Okay, so you're a big Judge Dredd fan. Because no. To be fair, the only comics I could know numbers for would be G.I. Joe, Transformers, and maybe Spider-Man from the '80s. Like if you gave me a number for Amazing Spider-Man, I could probably tell you what was on the cover, as long as it's from the '80s. But anyway, so the judges go to investigate. Hold on a sec here. Oh yeah, so the word that came through was boing. Then Judge Dredd says, "Boing, you mean the miracle spray?" So he knows what's going on. Hold on a sec here. So then, oops, jumped back. I jumped ahead. Sorry guys. Oh, you can't even see my screen, so it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter.
I see everything.
Yeah,
I'm very disappointed in you.
So Judge Death is like, the dead fluids will heal my body. Soon I will occupy it and continue my work, Judge Anderson. So he's trying to revive his body, basically. But then the other judges come in. They shoot at this. So he's on kind of like this, almost like an operating table. But it has all these lasers that are shooting down at him, rejuvenating his body. And so then Judge Death is floating around, and then he's trying to get back into Anderson. He possesses Anderson to hit Judge Dredd with the double Captain Kirk punch, and then she's like, "Now Dredd, do it, the Boington." So then he shoots. It looks like a can of like aerosol, sprays her, and it envelops her in like this kind of organic kind of bubble type thing. Again, I don't know anything about this stuff. And then one of the other judges is like, "Grud, what on earth?" And then Judge Dredd says, "Well, you can't kill death." This is my best Judge Dredd voice. "You can't kill death. We had to trap him. There was only one way, and Anderson realized it. He's trapped in Anderson's head, encased in Boing. We can't ever risk Judge Dredd breaking free. Anderson can never come out of there." And she knew it. Her bravery will be remembered. And that's the last appearance of Judge Anderson, right? Oh, okay, I was wrong. Okay. But anyway, is that the ending? I forgot. Yep, that's the ending. Very cool story. I'm going to save my review for later, but since you're a special guest, Ismail, why don't you tell us, what did you think of this story?
I absolutely loved it. If I'm not mistaken, this should be one of the earliest appearances of Judge Anderson. I don't want to say it's her first appearance, but it's definitely one of the earlier ones. I thought it was a great story. One thing I love about Dredd is the kind of like colloquialisms that characters in verse use. And so that's why I love that scene at the nightclub because it's I can't even remember what the guy says, but let me go back up here a little bit real quick, see if I can find the DJ, and he says, more Skrotnig sounds coming round from the guy with the electric eyes right now, plug into the #1 blast. Who put the boop? Who put the boop on my best brown boots? Who put the glop on my zigga zigga zing zang? I mean, stuff like that makes the world of Dredd feel so rich, right? And it reminds me of something that I see frequently in my favorite sci-fi stories. So whether that's, I believe it's Star King or Starman by George R.R. Martin, Impra by a author at the Black Library, but they pretty much use language to kind of draw you in and hold you there, right? So absolutely loved it. I love how when Dredd sees him in the nightclub, it's either Dredd or one of the other judges that says it's a judge or a mockery of a judge, right? And the judges themselves are a parody of law enforcement. So Judge Death is essentially a parody of a parody, which only 2000 AD could pull off the way they pull it off in this comic. I thought that was absolutely brilliant. And of course, this is peak 2000 AD, right? And so you have Judge Death's backstory, absolutely over the top, absolutely ridiculous in the best way possible. The judges, they decide, hey, crimes are only committed by the living. Guess what we have to do? I mean, it's brilliant. It's absolutely brilliant.
Yeah. Awesome. Adam, what do you think?
Oh, I'm going to echo those sentiments. I love this story. One thing that I really love about the character of Judge Death, or Dath, really, is the fact that he is kind of the logical conclusion of how far the judges will go. Because as we've said in the early progs, Judge Dredd, what makes him defined is that he cannot break the law. He's incapable. He just cannot. He's not programmed in any capacity to do it. So he makes a great foil in the sense where if this was something that passed, if the judiciary changed something where the judges then had to eliminate life in order to prevent injustice from happening, like you could see Judge Dredd potentially following through. If he is that tantamount about following the law and not diverging from that at all, Judge Death makes a great dark reflection of him, both physically because he's so gaunt and so desiccant looking compared to the beefier frame of Judge Dredd, but in that ideology. And I think there's a very subtle brilliance with that by showing, yes, again, Judge Dredd, as you mentioned, Ismail, is this parody of like the hyper masculine, like American action hero. And then you have this parody of the parody, but that's showing how far it can go to an extreme. And, given no one likes getting political on this, I know, but considering the climate of things right now, it's not inconceivable to see such a logically ridiculous sort of mandate going to such a head. And I think it makes such a great parody of that in and of itself. Visually striking as well. Judge Death is, like I said, maybe not my favorite adversary, but he definitely is the most visually iconic. There's subtleties too, where the stripes on his one shoulder pad are composed of bones. There's like the descending fangs from his badge as well. There's a lot to go on. And then the lore of Judge Death and what led his world to having that mandate would be explained subsequently, and we would see an entourage of these dark judges eventually occur. And you know what? I think Judge Death stuck around and continues to be such a profound character for this series for that reason. He's the perfect foil for him. Again, maybe not my favorite villain or favorite perp throughout the run, but man, he hits those boxes. And what can you say about the art? Some of the top tier art. The only thing I will disagree with you on your great review, your great summary there, Mike.
I missed three things, but anyway, go ahead.
you did a very admirable job for what's essentially a dense comic.
Yeah.
But I do think there needed to be some sort of maybe textual aid to the reader to show what was happening, because there was an oddity with Judge Death's hand phasing through people. I do think without that sort of cue, it could have been a little bit confusing. I wonder how much people at Warrior 2000 AD, I should say, decided, oh, maybe that will be kind of confusing for the audience. We should put in some sort of textual like context to elucidate what's happening. And they don't really do that going forward for subsequent viewings of the Judge Death character. So I will argue that, because otherwise I think this is as near a perfect Judge Death story, and definitely near a perfect Judge Dredd story as any I've read.
I'll just say, I'm going to counterpoint that one little thing. In a perfect world, Brian Bolland would have redrawn it and shown the hand coming out of his back or something. Like, I know what you're saying. It's like, okay, well, the comic is drawn. It's in the can. It's not really clear. We'll add some dialogue. But do you agree that in a perfect world, you wouldn't even need that dialogue?
Well, in a perfect world, there would be no Judge Death.
Okay. Anyway, okay, so Nice Man, what do you think of this story?
Well, my perspective is from a different angle, I think, because I don't disagree with anything that anybody has disagree with anything. Oh my God, help me!
Anything anyone has said, yes.
Thank you. I'm just overwhelmed by how great the art is. Brian Bolland is one of my favorite artists, and not just subjectively, objectively. And he can do it all. He can hit the high points of ironic humor at the same time, making it exciting, making it just wonderfully attractive as well. Like, for example, when she's in the car and she's got the skeleton next to her, right? It's a skeleton. Judge Death is just a skeleton. And the skeleton is communicating with her, telling her, "Don't fight me, Anderson. I'm too strong for you." And she says, "Get lost, creep." I mean, it's great. Isn't it great? You're driving along, a damn skeleton is talking to you, and you tell it to get lost, creep. But Brian Bolland still conveys it in a way that you can appreciate it on a kind of serious level, serious drama level, and at the same time, it's perfect humor. Hits the note, the artistic note. So Brian Bolland can do no wrong. Absolutely can do no wrong. Just wonderful, wonderful art. And the thing I also think is that British comics, to me, are like going to the theater. American comics are like watching TV shows, because American comics have the bent or trend of soap opera, and British comics are more theatrical. Really, for me, there's a huge gulf between them, huge. And this is a perfect example. We're not really here into the backstory of Judge Dredd, and it'd be like if you were like the Punisher. Well, my wife and my kids were murdered by blah blah blah. That's my motivation. No, his motivation is don't break the law. So
keeps it simple.
Yeah, I mean, again, I think you know what I mean, right? You can imagine going to the theater to see Judge Dredd like this, at the theater, whereas a typical American comic book is more kind of like, on TV and the soap opera aspects of it. So I don't disagree with anything that has been said, but those are the two things that stand out most to me, the Brian Bolland art and the theater of it all.
Well, and the thing is the one thing I noticed reading those early Judge Dredds from the very beginning, they were aimed at a younger audience than I expected, only because Judge Dredd is known to be so violent. So that did surprise me. But what I also noticed, going along with what you said, is that these stand up as something that they don't feel dated. I feel like I can read it and enjoy it as an adult, as a 48-year-old. I can still enjoy it. Whereas American comics from this time period I can enjoy some of them, but they're very overly wordy. There's too much exposition. There's too many thought balloons. some of the comics are overloaded with confusing, action and confusing text, and this flows a lot better. That's another thing. So I don't know if you want to do a little comment on the American comics versus British comics, Ismail. Do you feel the same way?
Well, I mean, reflecting on early Dredd, one thing I will say is that one thing that's always struck me is that juxtaposition of this dystopian future and this British humor, right? Mm-hmm. I don't want to call it gallows humor, but it's kind of like gallows humor. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And that's one thing that you see throughout a lot of the series that rise up from that kind of began in that era, whether it's, Warhammer 40,000, which is a super grim, dark setting, but then you have these orcs speaking in Cockney accents, and it's just ridiculous. It's funny, it's ridiculous, it's over the top, and that's what Dredd is, right? They all kind of came from this era, and they're all grounded in those in those aspects of British culture that at least that's what it seems to me, right? You look at Monty Python, some of this stuff could be quite dark, but at the same time hilarious, right? So I earlier this month I was reading Animal Man by Grant Morrison. Mm-hmm. And that's one thing that really struck me out. I will say he was very verbose, but I love that juxtaposition of very verbose language, very theatrical, very dramatic. And at the same time, there's all this humor. It's so ridiculous at times, right? It's so funny. So, I definitely see where Paul's coming from. And there's something very special about that period in British pop culture that gave rise to all these different properties that, we can look back, know and love today, right? I mean, I read this story when it was released as part of the complete case files when I was, I might have been 19, and I loved it. I absolutely loved it. I could not stop thinking about Brian Bolland's art style, about the humor, the characters. And so there's a certain timelessness to it that I think is absolutely amazing.
Agree, 100%. Okay, so I guess we can jump on to the next one, right?
Well, did you give your thoughts on the comic, Mike?
Oh, did I? I don't know. I mean, yes, of course I loved it, and I'm a huge fan of Brian Bolland. Again, mostly I'm familiar with his covers, but I love his interiors. Again, the thing that always impresses me about these Judge Dredd stories and most British stories is this is only, what is this, 17 pages long? Okay, so that's about twice as long as we're used to with Judge Dredd, but still, there's a lot of story packed in there, and I appreciate the fact that it's done one and done, right? Like they set up a premise, they have complications, and then it's resolved. And I think especially that I'm comparing this to the other Judge Dredd stories, we can see how far it's advanced and how much better it's become. And I think my favorite scene in the whole book is when Judge Anderson is back at her apartment, just because from my experience reading Judge Dredd, so far we haven't seen too much of that yet. Just like their personal lives, and you can see she's got her boots off, and we can see her bare feet. It's like, it just reminds me of like Blade Runner or something. Like, oh, I want to see more of this, right? Like just opening up that world and seeing their everyday life. It's great. So yeah,
I just want to say, I think it's great Judge Death was conscientious enough to get her to put her boots back on before he walked out.
That's a good point.
What a gentleman, right?
I know, right?
Yeah. Other than the few moments I mentioned with the dialogue, but again, I can forgive it because it was a monthly or a weekly comic, and they didn't have time to make everything perfect, so I can forgive it for that. But everything else as a package, I love it. So yeah, so now we can jump to the Forever Crimes. And Adam, do you want to do this one?
Sure, why not? I will do it. Forever Crimes. So this is definitely a shorter one in this collection. So this has no connection directly to the preceding story. We should mention all three of these stories don't really connect aside from being Judge Dredd tales, all part of the same universe.
Right.
So this one starts off with an investigation taking place in the year 2101. Again, I do love when sci-fi comics give particular years. Thank you for doing that. It's just a preference of mine. But he's going to the suspended animation clinic. So basically, what's happening is he's talking to somebody because there has been a crime committed. Essentially, a person has opted to take their own life because of something to do with blackmailing or some sort of extortion. So Judge Dredd is going to this cryogenic clinic to have one of the inhabitants of it thawed out so he can share this information with her. This happens to be the mother of the person who unlifed themselves. So what happens is there's this really grisly scene where he's talking over this near frozen body of this older woman, talking to her about what had happened. So yeah, again, this person was not able to pay up for this sort of exploitation, this blackmail that they were being put through. And in a surprisingly harrowing exchange, when Judge Dredd goes to Dr. Gold, who is the cryogenic technician, to say, okay, you can put her back, she goes, no, now that my son is dead, I have no real reason to sustain my life. You can put me into the departure lounge, which is just such a dark, like it's a somber, but also hilarious sequence going to that sort of gallows humor that was mentioned earlier, which I totally agree with. It is omnipresent throughout this story. Anyway, Judge Dredd has heard part of this extortion racket that's happened is connected to this one place where people tend to go to within the Forever Towers. So he goes there to try to find the person who was extorting the son of this woman that he was just interrogating. Obviously, the person sees a judge is there, and he goes to run through the facility and escape down a chute, which he assumes is a laundry chute. No, it's actually a garbage disposal chute, and he is mowed alive while Judge Dredd is trying to retch him back up, but he doesn't. He's not able to save him. He is completely torn apart, but luckily he does have his vest with his address book in it. So,
well, but the key line of dialogue, well, at least he left me his address. It's almost like I can see Sylvester Stallone or Arnold Schwarzenegger delivering that line. It's great.
At least he left me his address. I can't do it Stallone, but anyway. So with that said, the judges are investigating the tower at this point, and Dredd is going through these records and finding out this information doesn't really make sense, that this person couldn't possibly have been the one who masterminded this type of exploitation that is happening for seemingly a lot of these residents in this facility where the people are being cryogenically suspended. And that's when he realizes, oh, wait, there is one person who possibly could be coordinating this all. So he goes back into the facility. I love that he's demanding to know where Dr. Gold is. The receptionist at the desk says, in the operating theater, but you can't go in there. There's no place a judge can't go. Slamming his fist down, kicks open the door as he witnesses Dr. Gold in the middle of unthawing one of the patients to, again, extract some information because he is the one blackmailing all these individuals, trying to extort money from them by getting the secrets divulged from their patients. What a scheme. What a bad egg this guy is. Well, Judge Dredd is there, and he's putting him under arrest. Of course, Dr. Gold, like a rational person, says, don't shoot, I'll come quietly. But psych, hits him with a nice blast of liquid, hydronitrogen. I know elements with pure liquid nitrogen, freezing his helmet, preventing him from being able to see. And so Judge Dredd knows he will not be able to win this fight because he can't see. The liquid nitrogen is just freezing his body. Luckily, as he acknowledges, he doesn't need to see in order to get his man, and he shoots a bullet, one of those smart bullets they have, that shoots through the glass container that was kind of protecting Dr. Gold from the liquid nitrogen and from the other elements in that facility, and of course also shoots through his head. With his brain injury, Dr. Gold is passing away, and he says, well, at the very least, this brain wound being fatal means you will not be able to take me into incarceration. And Judge Dredd, the little scoundrel, goes, That's where you're wrong, Doctor. And he is also frozen and put on ice as part of a life sentence. And Judge Dredd, with one thematic connection I appreciate with the preceding story, ending the story by saying, even death is no escape from the law.
Yeah, I love it.
So,
Oh, go ahead.
so I was just gonna say, there's just a couple things I wanted to mention. Some of the coldest lines in Judge Dredd are spoken in this comic. I mean, oh my God. A judge doesn't. Wait, what does he say earlier? You forget one thing judges don't need to see. That is so cold-blooded. And then another thing is like, so they're not just. So this guy is not just going to serve a life sentence, right? So he's being frozen so that essentially, when science has advanced enough to where they can like heal the injury he suffered, they're going to dethaw him, heal him, and then have him serve the maximum penalty.
I know, that blows my mind.
It's so, oh my God,
cold.
So crazy.
Uh-huh.
Literally cold.
Yep. Well, I think I kind of like the story in this better in a way, only because it's more of a mystery. It's an intriguing mystery that incorporates some sci-fi. Like the previous one was more supernatural. This one's more sci-fi. So I think I like the premise of this one better. Otherwise, of course, the art is great, right? Everything about it's great. Yeah, like the colors are even great. Like some of the shadow work, and I just thought this one was excellent. Nice man, what did you think?
The art, like you said, the art and the coloring is first rate. You know, if I were an editor at Marvel or DC and probably looking over some of these 2000 ADs, I'd say we've got to get this artist here. We've got to get him to do some work for us. So I absolutely love the art. The story, of course, the space is limited. There's only so much they can do. And they did what they could within a short time frame. So, put in whatever little clever bits they can, including the bit about, deep freezing his body till, as you said, till they find a cure, bring him back to life, kind of, restore his health, and then slap him with a life sentence. That's just great, isn't it? Can you imagine? You brought me back to do that, you bastards. Yeah, but he deserves it. And so nice touches there. My favorite bit was the heat-seeking bullet. Not a heat-seeking missile, a bullet. I don't need to see. I just fire. It's gonna get you. And I love the swerve that it takes with the Brian Bolland. It's going like a typical bullet, and now it's like, oh, okay, I'm going to change course. Wonderful. Heat-seeking missiles. No, heat-seeking bullet, which I thought was great for 2101, which is when the story takes place. So the only nitpicky part is this is 2101, and they're still using paper files. Come on.
I love it, though. Retrofuturism. I think it's so cool.
I think it's just they couldn't imagine zero paper.
I was going to ask, did anyone notice the owner of that gambling hall getting arrested? Presumably for lying to Dredd?
Yep.
I wonder how many years he got in the ISO cubes.
Right.
I have to go back to that. What page was that? Was that 21 or so?
Where is that?
I think it's when they're packing up everything and Judge Dredd is with the investigation team.
Is it? I'm on
20?
page 20. Is it 20?
I think so. Let's go to page 20. And I know we're on page 20. But first of all, the guy going down the laundry chute, I have to say, which American writer does that remind you of? There's a little pop quiz for you.
Okay.
I would say either one of the Coen brothers.
No, I mean comics writer.
Oh.
I don't know. Honestly, I don't know. Maybe Frank Miller. Maybe Frank Miller.
No, none of you? It's a shame.
Beats me.
A really good prize lined up, which I just can't give you now, I'm afraid. Michael Fleischer.
The Spectre. Yes. Okay. There you go. I was just
Instead,
go
like
ahead.
wood, right?
Yeah.
In the Spectre, where he was sliced up into like wood sculpture.
It's so
And here he is. You know, what is this? A wood chip? Oh, it's the garbage
I
disposal.
love it.
It's a carburetor, yeah.
It's
The
funny.
guy,
I love.
you got my legs.
It's funny you should mention
I love
that
how
'cause-
Dredd.
Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
I was gonna say I love how Dredd automatically knew who it was. It's like, hey, you,
Yeah.
without any hesitation. It's like, yeah, that's the perp right there. You know.
You know, they have few pages. He doesn't have time, to go.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I was going to
Yes.
say, it's funny you mentioned Michael Fleischer because just today I was listening to a podcast about that lawsuit that he got into where he sued the Comics Journal because Harlan Ellison called him crazy, bugfuck crazy or something. And the lawsuit lasted years, like until 86 before he lost the lawsuit against Harlan Ellison. But anyway, I was just listening to that today.
Yeah.
I just want to throw one thing here because quick review. It's great. I think this, one point I'll make is it's a kind of return to what we saw in the early iteration. It's a lot of parody, a lot of dark humor. There's sort of, I think, overarching, what should I say, ominousness that happened in the previous story with Judge Death is replaced with that just great satirical sense of humor in this one. And that's always my preferred Judge Dredd story. So that's good. Case in point, and this is what I want to highlight, after having the homing bullet go through his brain, the doctor continues to talk, saying, unfortunately, a brain wound like mine is fatal. It's like, how are you talking?
Right.
And that's not a criticism. That's adding to the sort of dark humor of the story that I love. I asked before what maybe this would do for an American audience first being exposed to it. I don't know if a lot of people would get the sort of satirical nature of it because it is so on the nose for a lot of action hero tropes that were happening at the time of its publication. So I wonder if it was over people's heads or if some got it. I think the right people got it, but
maybe through their heads.
Oh, you know what? I'm going to call you Nice Joker now because that was great.
Nice. The obvious one would have been Joke Man, but you had to go with Nice Joker. Okay.
Yeah.
Anyway.
And
I like walking the trends.
Yeah.
I have one other thing to say related to something I said earlier, and that is, I think you notice that all this British talent in the 80s, writers and artists, they mainly did work for DC as opposed to Marvel.
Yep.
And just like you said earlier, that British comics to me are much more theatrical for the theater, and Marvel comics, for example, much more for TV, for like in the soap opera aspects. I think DC comics are typically more theatrical than Marvel, better suited to theater. And so I think maybe it's at least a coincidence that DC was the one that really snagged all these guys because it fit better with them, And we saw that like with, I guess to a great extent with Swamp Thing, although you could say Swamp Thing is quite complex, and Grant Morrison with Animal Man, because like you said earlier, Adam, that you can have some serious stuff going on. Oh no, Ismail, was it you who said? Oh yeah, because you've just been rereading Animal Man. You've got some serious stuff going on, but there's some barbed humor in there as well. And that's so typically kind of British. So I think the British guys were very, very good and a very good fit for DC. And I may sound biased, but I think they did the DC stuff that they did better than the American writers. Really?
Oh, there's no doubt. Yeah, of course.
I mean, there's a reason that that Animal Man run, that Swamp Thing run, and what Alan Moore did with Watchmen. There's a reason those runs are just so legendary, right?
I mean,
people freak out when anyone approaches them.
Everything. The last two issues, last issue of Superman in Action that Alan Moore did, and then again you have Alan Grant and John Wagner. I think for a time they did Detective, didn't they? Alan Grant for sure, and so on and so on.
I think I hate to say it because I love Mark Grenwald, but if you want to see the American version of the Watchmen, just read Squadron Supreme.
Right.
Like I tried to reread that a few months ago. Oh my God. And again, I love Mark Grenwald, but it was a chore. Like there's some great ideas, but and Mark Grenwald has heart, and that's why I love his writing, but he just doesn't have the discipline and the skill to be able to write, to like flesh out his themes. And to plan out a series of 12 issues where it seems like he used up all his good ideas and then he kind of restarted it again. And I don't know if you guys have read Squadron Supreme.
I have, yeah.
Yeah,
I haven't.
I haven't.
Okay, Adam, what did you think?
Oh, I agree with your assessment.
Yeah.
I just feel, otherwise, the inverse paled in comparison. The only American writer I can think at the time that maybe was even remotely close. And I'm saying this more for his work back then than anything contemporarily, but like James Robinson, for example, as an American writer.
I was going to say Frank Miller.
Well, his early stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. One thing I want to say.
But James Robinson, I thought he was British, isn't he?
Yeah, he used to be with my...
oh, you're right. He is British. Then, okay, that negates my point. Okay.
Yeah.
He was in the monthly group that me and the others used to get together once a month in London, in the city. Mm-hmm. And he used to be in that group.
Well,
so yeah.
Better than closed. It's all right.
He's very, very British, not American.
No, okay. Thank you for that clarification. I don't know why I had it in my head he was an American author. But to your point, I just want to say, I think there is something about the DC superhero universe where they've really allowed the universe to be shaped consequentially of what would happen if these fantastical beings and superheroes and whatnot existed in this world. And you see consequences. You see architecture. You see city landscapes. You see technology reflecting that. Whereas in Marvel, from what I've seen at the very least, aside from a few superficial things, they tried to keep it entrenched as this is what the real world is. It just happens to have giant flying robots and talking raccoons and everything else happening. And there's a disconnect there where there's this attempt at profundity in Marvel comics that I often feel falls flat. Whereas in DC, we talk about the theatrical, they let those theatrical elements come out predominantly. And I think that was part of what allowed this like great enclave of British writers to come in and really just kind of pave the way for the rest of the runs going forward throughout the late 80s and early 90s in DC in that way, because they're not afraid to acknowledge that they're in a world full of superheroes and talking gorillas and aliens and whatnot.
And that's why I have, it's every year that goes by, I have more of an appreciation for the Adam West Batman, because even if you take out all the humor, it is a great adaptation of the Batman mythos. Just the themed gangs, like the Riddler would have his gang that were all themed, and the Joker would have his gang, and that just all that stuff. The fact that it's the Gotham Library, the Gotham Museum, it's just like a fairy tale, right? And it works for those characters. It works perfectly. But it's like you said, when you bring it too close to reality, like I love Christopher Nolan's movies, but it's so close to reality that it's almost like the Uncanny Valley, where you're like, wait, it's Chicago, it's the real world, but the Joker's there, so it doesn't make sense. But when it's the Tim Burton Batman, you don't question anything, right? You just go along with it. Anyway.
Well, when you see the Sky Needle in Gotham, you start like questioning things,
right,
but
Right. Okay, anyway, we got one more story to do. Ismail, would you like to summarize the last story?
I can certainly try.
Okay.
So this is Punk's Rule, correct?
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Alrighty. And so I think I should probably give a bit of background on this prog, because it happens, if I'm not mistaken, almost immediately after the Judge Cal saga. So Mega City 1 has just been they've gone through a big mess on both the political and civil, military level, etc. Right, and so the city is pretty much in anarchy, and so you have in the story Punk's Rule, it starts with a Hall of Justice. That's spelled Justus, right? And you have this gang. They're hauling a man into the hall to judge him. And so you have someone that says, hey, the boys have hooked a Norm. What did he do, Filetooth? Well, the dumb Crumbo tried to come in a district without paying his toll. We're taking him to the Hall of Justice for trial. And so his only crime was walking through the area without paying the toll. And there's this hilarious little joke in the bottom right corner where you have these two people talking. One says, hey, your breath smells awful. And the response is, gee, thanks. And so inside the Hall of Justice, Gestapo Bob Harris, who is the chief judge and also the head of this gang, he decides that he's going to pass sentence on this man. The man, of course, says it's outrageous. And Jim Nausea comes up to defend the perp. And he says, my client would just like to say that he's as guilty as sin, so he wants to pay the maximum penalty. And so, of course, Gestapo Bob says, well, I find the defendant guilty as charged and sentence him to give everything he owns to me. Strip the Crumbo and get rid of him. And so they throw him out in nothing but his underwear. Well, they let him keep his fedora and his umbrella. How nice of them.
Classy.
And right. And it's here we find out the name of this gang. They're called the Cosmic Punks, and they've taken over this sector of Mega City 1. They're the law, judge, jury, and executioner. So in the real Hall of Justice, we see Judge Griffin, who is the new chief judge, and he's pointing at a map, and there's all these different areas of Mega City 1 that are, as from what we can see, they're kind of like hot spots. And he says, street gangs, they've come back in force. It's worse here in Southside Sector 41. The Cosmic Punks have set themselves up as judges and declared a no-go area. Stamp on it sharp. Organize an assault squad, 50 men should do. But then Judge Dredd chimes in. He says, I disagree. We're giving these cheap lawbreakers more credit than they deserve. The street gangs have lost their fear of us. It's time we give it back to them. Let's show them that one judge is worth 100 punks. Very, very nice line there. And so we go back to the Cosmic Punks. They've been tipped off that they're supposed to be hit by a judge. And they've got their goons out. You've got Filetooth and a whole bunch of other dudes. One of them hears an engine. Filetooth warns them to keep their blaster fingers oiled. And they see a garbage truck. Who's that Crumbo in the cab? It's none other than Judge Dredd. And Judge Dredd reminds them that there are no others. There's just him. And that the Justice Department only needs one judge for him. And basically he takes them on, starts blasting them as usual. He pew-pews one, stamps his foot down on another, threatens to give him a third eye. And as we see, he starts throwing them in the garbage truck. There's some perps that are trying to ambush him. Boom. They don't stand a chance. He hits them with their steel-tipped high-penetration shot. He gets someone trying to hit him from around the corner, uses a hot shot to hit another guy who's hiding. Beautiful panel there. Mm-hmm. And so, as we can see, the garbage truck is pretty much full as he heads to take on their boss, Gestapo Bob. And he doesn't last very long. He gets thrown in there with the rest of the perps, and Dredd does something pretty awesome here. He talks to him like an absolute chump. He says, I hear you've been calling yourself a chief judge, Bob. I don't like that, Bob. It makes me kind of angry, especially coming from a cheap punk like you, Bob. What are you, Bob? And what does Bob say? He says, I'm a cheap punk. So Judge Dredd makes him say it as loud as he possibly can. And then he takes him outside. And so he drives them all the way to the South Mutiland Tunnel. And basically he offloads all of them outside Mega City 1. He basically banishes them. He tells them tells them to remove your citizenship. You will not be allowed to enter Mega City 1 for 10 years. And of course, you know, the cursed earth is pretty much hell. And so they say, look, give me 20 years, 30, just please don't banish me. It's hell on earth. In the name of mercy, don't do this. Mm-hmm. And Judge Dredd says a very, very cold line here. He says, look, it's harsh but necessary, or he's thinking this, let them serve as an example. Let every man know that citizenship is a privilege, not a right. The law must be obeyed. The law will be obeyed. End quote. Wow. What a story.
I once again loved it. Exploring the world of Mega City 1. And again, I'm not as familiar with Judge Dredd, but introducing us to these new characters that I haven't seen before, and the idea of exiling them outside the city is such a great one. So, yeah, I thought it was great. And of course, the art is awesome. There was a few really good moments, like when Judge Dredd, I'm going to zoom in on my thing here, when he kicks that one guy in the chin and his tongue is coming out, and just the motion of Judge Dredd's body is just excellent. And then on the same page, shooting with the heat-seeking bullet, and it goes through the window. And I love how the guy it's all in darkness, but we see the light coming in through the window. That's just a great shot right there. So yeah, I absolutely love this. Adamantium, what did you think? Oh, you were going to say something, Ismail?
Oh, no. Go ahead, Adam. Go ahead.
Oh, you know what? First off, yes, it's great. I love it. I have no criticisms of it. And this does something that I think the best Judge Dredd stories do, which is where it poses him in a position where he is definitely the protagonist, but the ends that he achieves are very questionable. And it's that dark humor that comes from it again. These people, I mean, they're not, the upstanding citizens that I think we would want to live next door to, but they take Clark Kent, they take his suit off, they let him walk back home in his underwear and his fedora. And so what does Judge Dredd do? He shoots them, beats the shit out of them, and then takes them out to the irradiated outlands of Mega City 1 to have who knows what happened to them. So again, the escalation of the punishment compared to the crime, again, it's not showing that he's wrong. This isn't a moralizing, makes you think, doesn't it? It's the irony of it that I love. It's that humor that just allows Judge Dredd to be such a compelling character, even when he is mainly meant to be satirical or a parody. It's still fascinating. Mm-hmm. And yeah, amazing art, amazing action sequences, the best one-liners in any comic character I have to say I've ever read come from Judge Dredd. So it's it's solid all the way through. I love it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Nice, man. What did you think?
Like Adam said, that's Clark Kent reduced to his underwear. Mm-hmm. It's a great visual joke, isn't it? Really. So yeah, that was a nice touch. Which in lesser hands, they wouldn't have done that. In lesser hands, it would have just been some character. You know what I mean? But they always pay attention to these little things. Like, okay, let's make him Clark Kent in his underwear. And the other thing is that I already have my own answer to this question. What's the difference between Judge Dredd and Mr. A?
And Mr. A? I have no idea. What's the answer?
Well, no, I'm asking your opinion.
I've never read Mr. A.
Well, Adam, have you?
No, actually, I haven't.
Oh, Ismail, have you?
No, me neither.
It's kind of obscure.
You do know who he is, right?
Yes.
I'm familiar with the character. It's a Ditko character, right?
Right.
Was he before the question?
After.
Okay.
Because this was published in Wallywood's Wits End. At least I think it was after. And I have, hold on one second. I have.
Oh, wow.
I have one, see.
Mm.
And
wow. Interesting.
I mean, of course, I'm showing you. But the thing is, without you knowing too much about him, it kind of defeats my question, I think.
Well, I know he was kind of an influence for Rorschach from Watchmen, correct?
And remember, Alan Moore said that he had a brief conversation with Steve Ditko about this and about how it's Rorschach is really derived from influence by Mr. A, and Ditko with no sense of irony whatsoever, said, yes, but Rorschach is insane. In other words,
great.
Mr. A isn't. He's completely rational, but Rorschach is insane.
Right.
Now, here, for me, the difference between Mr. A and Judge Dredd, because this is what Mr. A would say, just like this. Harsh but necessary, let it serve as an example. Let every man know that citizenship is a privilege, not a right. The law must be obeyed. The law will be obeyed. This is Ditko. This is Mr. A. This is John Wagner having a little, Judge Dredd is like Mr. A tongue-in-cheek. Mm-hmm. Because there are elements of humor scattered even in the short little stories. But in Mr. A, there is no humor. None. In Mr. A, it's 100% serious. There would not be a visual gag of a Clark Kent in his underwear.
Mm-hmm.
And so
I was going to ask,
yes.
because I was going to ask you guys if that was a slogan that perhaps maybe 2080 was like kind of poking fun at. Citizenship is a privilege, not a right. I was wondering, but if that was maybe them kind of having a bit of fun with Mr. A, I mean, that's an awesome little reference there.
Judge Dredd is Mr. A, but with visually tongue-in-cheek, with supporting elements tongue-in-cheek, and taken to perhaps another level. But we're all in on the joke, We're in on the joke because there's all these aspects of humor. But if you ever read Mr. A, you will find no humor. It will just simply be, for example, somebody kidnaps a woman. He's on a rooftop. Mr. A rescues the woman. The man ends up on a flagpole hanging over the side of the building, which is many, many stories up. And he'll say, Mr. A, you have to save me, save me. And Mr. A says, no, I don't think so.
And that's it, yeah.
And as the guy plunges to his death, it's just like 1940s Batman,
right.
A fitting end for your kind,
right.
Yeah. So when I see stuff like this, of course, if nobody knows, any readers know nothing about Mr. A, they take it for what it is. And we've identified all the elements that make it good and entertaining and this and that. But I think also if you know about Mr. A as well, then you realize, I think, too, that John Wagner is having a little bit of it's all a little bit tongue-in-cheek, Mr. A.
I just want to add into this quickly because I had that question I was asking earlier. How does this go over for an American audience? And I think we have our answer. We had that Judge Dredd film, not the wonderful one with Carl Urban, the one that I love, ironically, with Sylvester Stallone, where it's bereft of humor. You don't get the sense that the hyper violence and that the type of action going on in it is done for spectacle or to kind of poke fun at the tropes or done in any ironic fashion. That's what happens. I do think when these stories are not appreciated with those levels that you were talking about, Nice Man, where you talk about the levels of irony, the self-awareness, the satire, what we end up with is someone taking it on a surface level as, oh, maybe this is, a character that we need to follow. It should be plain as day that this is satirical, that this is with a tongue-in-cheek bent. But, objectivism doesn't really have much of a sense of humor, nor do I think it can necessarily pick up on that. So I think what we get is what we had as the American adaptation of Judge Dredd in that Sylvester Stallone movie, which, I kind of love it ironically because they fail to touch upon any of the points that made Judge Dredd such a unique character, and they just make a generic action film. I kind of laugh at that. Pardon me?
It was a Rambo film.
Yes, it was a bona fide Rambo film. And then later on in 2012 with the Carl Urban film, that humor is there, that self-awareness is there. It is maybe grittier and darker than the tone of the comics to a degree, but there is still enough self-awareness where you can still tell, no, this isn't just glorification of this violence. There's something else happening here. And I think to me, this is why maybe the Eagle Comics run of Judge Dredd didn't really last that long, because I was looking at the run. It doesn't look like it lasted that many years. And I think it's because the American audiences, by and large, they were not accustomed to this sort of tongue-in-cheek storytelling. They wanted to take it seriously, and they didn't get it.
This is another aspect of American culture, as I learned when I first came to live here. And that is, excuse me, Ismail, but Americans tend to take things very literally. So you see those last two panels that we were just speaking about with these thought balloons, for them, I think for the average American, honestly, it will be taken very literally. I know this is serious. This is not tongue in cheek. This is not, a little bit of a parody of a Mr. A. No, this is straight. And so therefore, yeah, it would be missed, wouldn't it? And in films, in RoboCop, all of you saw RoboCop, right? The first.
Yeah.
And Starship Troopers.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, they both had that satirical element, tongue-in-cheek and everything else. And of course, that's what you need in a Judge Dredd film. Of course it is. So it's too bad that first one, even though you enjoyed it a lot, Adam, it's too bad that it was really just Judge Dredd taken literally.
Yeah.
I wanted to make a point here about the last panel. I'm pretty sure I've heard someone over the past week say that, that citizenship is a privilege, not a right. I'm pretty sure.
Pretty sure, yeah.
I'm serious. And so, I could see that some people probably read that and take it as it being very literal, when it's, the comic is full of very visual, very obvious jokes. Perhaps one of my favorite little Easter egg is on the helmet of Gestapo Bob, where it says, "There's no just us. There's just us." Which I think is absolutely brilliant,
Yeah.
And one thing, though, I realized the first time I read this comic was that last line, right? It's all Dredd. He's thinking this. Like, this is how he thinks. Like, we're used to seeing, right? We're used to hearing him say this stuff out loud, but this is a window into his mind, and he's actually thinking like this, which gives it a whole new level of irony, satire, and kind of horror, to be honest with you.
That's a good point.
Yeah. And I just want to say one thing, Mike, because, I don't want it to come across like I am painting an American readership under just one lens. Like, being in Canada and throughout where I've lived in this country, I've talked to people about some of the properties that Nice Man just brought up, like Starship Troopers, RoboCop. I've brought up even like Rorschach from Watchmen. And I've had conversations with people where I've started trying to be on a level where I thought we both understood the irony underscoring it. And it became very apparent that, oh, no, you're taking this stuff at surface level. You think Rorschach is right. You think he is a justified character. You think, RoboCop is bereft of irony. And all you have to do is look at the sequels to RoboCop or Starship Troopers, and you see where that mentality leads you to. But I just wanted to throw that out there. Sorry, Ismail, you wanted to say something?
Oh, no. Oh, yeah, I was going to add a point about Starship Troopers. Like, you look at the initial reception of the movie, there are a lot of people that kind of took it seriously. Like, they didn't realize that it's such a tongue-in-cheek satire. Some people, they really took it seriously, and some people, they kind of agreed with some of the stuff they were seeing.
Of course.
Yeah.
And we should also mention the director, Paul Verhoeven, who did Starship Troopers and RoboCop, is Dutch, I believe, right?
He is,
Yes.
yeah.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah, both great movies. In fact, it's been argued that RoboCop is the perfect movie, but we're not going to get into that. That's for another.
Are you saying by yourself?
Well, other people who I know, maybe me as well. But yeah, so I guess I don't know what else to say about this. I did love it, but if we do want to revisit Judge Dredd in the future, you guys are the experts. Let me know. Do you want to jump back into chronological order? Do you want to jump around? Just, send me your suggestions.
I think that, Ismail is the undoubted Judge Dredd, right? Undoubted.
You guys are too kind.
So if
Too kind.
you'll come back to it, I think he should pick it out. That would be good.
Okay.
I'd love to come back on, and like I said, chronological or not. I mean, I just love talking Dredd, especially with such such intelligent people like you guys. So I wouldn't mind coming back.
Shucks. You're too kind. Anyway, yeah, thanks for joining us. Seriously, it was really nice to have you on. We'll definitely have you on in the future. We'll be in touch.
Awesome. Thank you.
Glad it worked out.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, for sure. Glad you got the headphones. Usually we have to kind of figure things out as we go along, but you're totally ready to go, so that's good.
Is that a pointed comment on me, Mike?
Yeah, no, anyway, let's get back to talking about comic books. No, I'm just kidding. We want to thank Adam for joining us. We want to thank Nice Man for joining us, as always. And you can hear or watch every episode of our show at comicbooksyndicate.com or YouTube. Coming up next, I had it open. It's going to be, another Garth Ennis comic called True Faith, which I've never read. So I'm looking forward to that because the last one was really good. That should be out in about 2 weeks. So until then, see you later.